Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Discovery Season 5, Episodes 1 and 2, Red Directive and Under the Twin Moons. So this video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Discovery, so I have to start with the spoiler warning for Discovery up to Season 5, Episode 2. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So I decided to cover both episodes at the same time, and also you do have to excuse me if I come off as a bit low energy or groggy, because I just had surgery yesterday and just still a bit groggy from that and recovering, but I did want to pop on here to talk about the premiere episodes of Discovery. So, I have as I said on my channel before, I have mixed feelings about Discovery. As a show overall, there's some things I really like and some things I really don't like. I think it's been a while since I've seen the earlier seasons, so it's hard for me to say definitively, but I do think that Season 4 was my favorite season of the show. I thought they were moving in the right direction, and when I started watching Season 5, I felt really interested and really eased back into it. I do like the setting of being in the 32nd century, and I think they do take full advantage of that with a lot of Easter eggs and callbacks that are really subtle. They're not like in your face like the Picard Season 3 member berries were. It's just there in the background, so if you're not familiar with that stuff, it's going to make no difference to you, but if you are familiar, you'd be like, hey, I know that alien in the background. Which I like, and I like what they do with the 32nd century, and it is interesting seeing the new technology and the way they use it. So it was interesting for me because I wasn't really looking forward to this season that much. I was kind of like, yeah, it's Star Trek, I'll watch it, of course, and review it, of course, but it wasn't something I was like clamoring to see like I am for, say, for example, the next season of Lower Decks. But as you can see with all my Lower Decks Funko Pops back there, huge fan of that show. But anyway, but I wasn't as eager to see the season of Discovery. It felt just a little bit like an obligation, like, oh yeah, I guess I'll have to review it. But I actually liked it. Actually, once I started watching and I got back into the feel lifting, the feel for the characters, the feel for the setting, and I was thinking to myself, wouldn't that be funny if this turned out to be the best season, because it's the last season? So if the show finally got really good and then they canceled the show. But a lot of the issues I have with Discovery are still present in these two episodes. One being the over sentimentality, which in both these episodes, I mean, it wasn't the worst it's been, but it was definitely there. How they, always get all teary-eyed and cry over everything. Like earlier Star Trek shows didn't do that. And the other thing that something I've commented a lot on Discovery before is the cinematography and the camera work, particularly how they need to constantly have the camera moving and spinning around. They still had this one scene I noticed in particular that had Adair and Tilly talking like over a console trying to figure out how to solve a technical problem, and they had to fucking spin that camera around. See, this is a mindset that it's all due to Abrams style. Like, that's the problem. That's one of the biggest issues I have with Discovery, which I'm actually kind of glad it's coming to an end, because it was more of inspired because the Abrams films were such a hit that they did, even though they didn't set it in the Kelvin timeline, thank fucking God, but they still followed the same stylistic choices, the lens flares and the constantly being kinetic and moving the camera around, and I don't like it. This is actually one of the things I like Strange New Worlds better for, is that they don't find the need to constantly spin the camera around. I think they have some lens flares, but it's not as bad as this show is. But to be fair, there's one director who directs a lot of the important episode of Discovery. I think he's the main producer on the show as well, and this is definitely his style. But Jonathan Frakes even talked about how the producers of the show tell most all the directors to make it cinematic and make it big, and I think their idea of being cinematic is to spin the fucking camera around and have the fast-paced dialogue where they're quipping and constantly yelling at each other and going blah 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 and going really fast and throwing quips out there while they're in the middle of action sequences. And I just don't like that style, especially for Star Trek. I don't mind that it has the action sequences, as long as it advances the story, which I believe in these 2 episodes a lot of the action sequences did. So I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm not one of these people who thinks there should be no action in Star Trek. I think that's ridiculous. Action's always been in Star Trek since the original series. It's just done differently now because of modern culture and technology has advanced. Which, by the way, this is something I've always loved about Discovery, was how beautiful and cinematic the sceneries are and what they can do with the bigger budget and advanced technology. Because, especially because I'm in the middle of rewatching that Next Generation, which always had these cheap sets with 12 extras, and seeing something that's way prettier, like the planet they go to in the second episode, the jungle planet, which looked beautiful, or the village they had in episode 1, which had tons of extras and it looked like an actual village and not a cheap soundstage. So I do appreciate that in modern Trek. That is something I always loved about Discovery, was the way it looks. I mean, is good, except for spinning the camera. Just keep the fucking camera stationary. It's not hard. But yeah, as I said, Strange New Worlds does that, and it feels more like Star Trek to me. It's one of the many reasons why I like Strange New Worlds better. Some people say that the Strange New Worlds are very quippy as well, and yeah, there's a little bit of that, but to me, it's not as bad. I think that because they talk at a slower pace. I mean, the fact that in Discovery, they're constantly really just quip, and it goes too fast, and I don't like it. I just don't like that style. So that's still there in these 2 episodes. And I didn't really expect that to change, to be honest, and even though, as I said, I think Discovery has improved last season, I think from what I see, these 2 episodes is probably going to be another really good season. But I am ultimately glad that it's coming to an end. I think that was the right decision to make. It's had a 5-year run. That's a good run. More than Enterprise got, although there was less episodes per season, but still. And so yeah, I think it's the time to bring the show to a close and move on to better shows that pull off Star Trek better, like Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, and hopefully Prodigy will stick around a bit longer. But I don't know. It remains to be seen about this Starfleet Academy, because if they get some of the same producers and directors from Discovery and still try to make it all spinny and shiny, then that might not be good either, but we'll see. It remains to be seen about that one. But anyway, so getting into these episodes specifically, as I said, I'm not feeling the best. So I'm not going to be in here forever, so I'm not going to go through beat by beat. So I'm just going to cut to the chase. See what I did there, because this episode, they referenced the chase from TNG. Yeah, I thought that was great that they referenced the chase. Because it makes sense, and this is, I believe, the first follow-up that we ever got in Star Trek to the chase, and that was a big deal that they revealed where humanoids came from, in the Milky Way galaxy. And, it's kind of thrown out there as an excuse to explain why all the aliens look like humans and with bumps on their forehead or whatever. And, but I like that they're following it up on it and not just making it a one-off excuse that they could write off or retcon, that they actually follow up on that and make it. Now, it is kind of like, I would probably refer to it as a soft retcon, that they have this ancient technology that helped them seed the worlds. That's this great device and everything. But because that really was not implied from the chase. But it's not a full retcon because it doesn't contradict anything. I think I'm going to use that term from now on, soft retcon. But to be clear, I'm fine with it. Like, I think it's fine. It's an interesting concept to go by. And before the season started, I heard theories on what this mystery thing artifact, because we knew that, or at least I knew from watching some videos, that season 5 was going to be about like an Indiana Jones quest type adventure where they're looking for this ancient technology, and I read spoilers that said it tied into the Next Generation, into Romulans. But the theory I saw was that it was the interphase device from that episode, The Next Phase. And I was like, that's not that big of a deal, especially with the 32nd century technology they have. It doesn't seem like phasing technology would be that big of a deal. So this is actually way better than that. I never suspected it would be the chase. I think that's great, personally. But this episode was kind of contrived, the way that Kovic was hiding this information from them until the end of the episode. And they had to, when Burnham was like, oh, I know someone outside of Starfleet who could help get us this information. And I thought, oh, Zora. Because Zora had like this complete library. Granted, I think her library of the entire existence of everything only went up to the 23rd century. Because she skipped with everyone else. She skipped the last, was it, how many years? 1,000 years, I believe, or 900, whatever the hell it was. Anyway, but she should know more about the progenitors if she has all this background. But whatever. The plot contrivance got to plot contrive. We gotta make it so the episode can happen, or so the season can happen in this case, which is fine, whatever. But yeah, I just found that whole plot point in season 1 kind of a bit contrived. Episode 1. And because they just wanted to withhold this information from the audience until the end of the episode. But it didn't really make sense for Kovic to hide this. Like, why would he say, oh, this is top secret cost, I need to know. Like, as Burnham and other people kept pointing out, it's like, we'll be able to be more effective in doing this very important job that you really want us to do. If you fucking tell us what the hell it is. So it was a bit of a contrivance, I think. And the whole red directive thing reminded me of the Omega directive from Voyager. How that was a need to know and classified to everyone except Captain above. But here she's not even telling a fucking admiral. So it's even more classified, a red directive. That's really stupid. And what the hell is Kovic's position? Why does he have a higher position than Admiral Vance? Like, how does that work? I don't really get what he does. But anyway, maybe he's like their version of Section 31 or whatever. But anywho, so we get a couple new characters in this episode. We get God, I can't remember their names. It's like Maul and Tall, I think. Hold on, let me look this one up. Mock and Talk, Maul and what? All right. Maul and Lack. It's Lak. Lack? Yeah, something like that. Anyway, I'm not very impressed with these bad guys. I'm not really looking forward to seeing them and being the main villains of this season. I don't know if they'll last the whole season. I kind of hope that they don't. I don't think they're that interesting. Um, and well, apparently we get the reveal at the end of episode 2 that that Maul is someone that Booker knew. I get the impression it was his sister or something. I don't know. Yeah, some kind of family member. But anyway, Lack, whatever his name is, apparently played by the same actor who played Kenzo in season 1 of The Expanse. If you remember, if you watched The Expanse, Kenzo was the corporate spy who went on the Rocinante and was spying on them for the UN. And he also appeared in season 1 episode of Discovery, along with 2 other actors from The Expanse, because I remember they had 3 actors from The Expanse in this one scene where they're prisoners who were attacking Burnham or whatever the fuck it was, and he was one of them. But yeah, it's weird. I didn't notice that was him. And then there's of course Captain Raynor, who played by another familiar actor. I first saw him in Memento, where he played Dodd. You gotta find Dodd. Anyway, but then of course he's probably more well known to science fiction fans as playing one of the Cylons on Battlestar Galactica, and I've seen him in a bunch of other things as well. And he's one of those people that's always typecast as either a villain or an asshole, and kind of like Ronnie Cox in that way, because Ronnie Cox also played a Starfleet captain who was a big asshole. Bigger than this one, I dare say, but but yeah, it seems like it's the same sort of thing. So as soon as I saw him, when I saw him in the previews, I'm like, oh yeah, he's the villain. And when he shows up, I'm like, oh no, he's actually working for the bad guys because he's the villain. I was convinced he was the villain just because that's how that actor's always typecast. But then I start to realize that he's just playing a hard ass. So he's not actually, or anti-hero, whatever you want to call it. So he's not actually the villain. And yeah, I think his character, some of the moments, the things he did where he was being kind of reckless and putting people's lives at risk. I felt I don't know. I like this actor, so I'm willing to see where they go with this character. But yeah, so, and it was interesting that we had in episode 1, we had that synth Fred, and as soon as I saw him, I was like, yeah, they're saying this is a Soong type android, and it was. They even mentioned Soong, but I think they mentioned Altan Soong. Fuck that guy. This whole storyline was dumb. But I mean, in Picard, it's been established, is now canon, that Altan Soong created a whole society of synths. But from the way they were talking in this episode, it seems like that synths are very rare, and especially ones that old. And it did make me think they could have Data show up in Discovery, because in Picard Season 3 they brought Data back, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think they said anything like he has a limited lifespan. Maybe they did and I'm just not remembering. Someone can correct me in the comments. I know for Picard they said he had a limited lifespan, because he's in an android body now too, but he was going to live out a normal lifespan. But I don't recall them saying that for Data. Maybe they did. I don't know. Anyway, the getting back to Captain Raynor, I thought he had those ears that looked like Vulcan ears, so I thought he was kind of a Vulcan Romulan descent, and maybe of mixed descent. But I watched this video that said he was actually one of those aliens from that throwaway, very mediocre, very forgettable episode of Deep Space Nine Season 2, Armageddon Game. I didn't recognize that him as that alien at all. I would have never gotten that because he didn't have the puffy hair like those aliens were known for. Not just the ears is less of what I noticed them for. Is all they had this big, huge, puffy hair. So they really wanted to make it be the aliens. They should have given him puffy hair, but that would have looked ridiculous. That hair looked horrible. But anyway, and of course, Book comes back, as I knew he would. And I knew they were going to bring him back and find some way to get him on board. Of course, I think I saw in the previews. But it just made a lot of sense. I knew they weren't going to have him sideline him for this season. And he's a good character, so it's great to see him back. And, of course, they're developing the romance between Saru and Vulcan, and that's really good. And the fact he's leaving the ship in order to take an ambassador position, and he's going to marry her. I don't think he's being written off the season either. I think that he's definitely going to appear in future episodes. They just need an excuse to bring Raynor on as the new first officer, which I wonder if he's still going to keep the rank of captain, even though he's going to be a first officer. Again, this is continuing the Abrams verse tradition of not giving a fuck about ranks, but whatever. To be fair, Star Trek 5 and 6 did that as well. They had like 3 captains on one ship. Anyway, so yeah, so I guess let's talk about episode 2, which well, alright, before I get to episode 2, let me give my rating for episode 1 out of 10. And I think I'm going to give this... God, I didn't think about this. I'm going to give it an 8. I don't think it's quite there as a 9, but it's a really strong episode. I thought it was a good start to the season. I think the action sequences were all good. And I think it sets up the season nicely. It has nice character beats, character moments. So yeah, I'll give that an 8. Extremely good. So, getting into episode 2, I definitely didn't like this episode as much. It was a little bit more filler, which we have to have. But I'm still hopeful that season 5 is going to have better pacing than the previous seasons, because that was... Even though I think season 4 is probably the best season, I still had tons of pacing issues. And that's always been, from the very beginning, one of Discovery's main faults is pacing. And so I wonder if season 5 is going to have better pacing, because it's a shorter season. They only have 10 episodes. And maybe they needed to slow pace episodes so they didn't fly through the story too quickly. And I talked about over sentimentality at the start of the video, but I did kind of like the Burnham and Saru scenes of her getting teary-eyed by saying goodbye and reflecting on their relationship and how much they helped each other. I just think maybe they could have just toned it down just a twinge. And that's mainly because they do this shit too often. Like, if they didn't do it all the time, that wouldn't seem like, yeah. But I liked it. I liked getting their chemistry, seeing them go off on one last adventure together, and Saru, being more insightful and showing him as the good first officer, and how she's saying, I could never replace you, which is true. I think Raynor's not going to be half as good as Saru. But yeah, so it was good getting them to go off on that kind of adventure. I don't know if I really like the book side plot where he was, trying to talk to Lack and Mull or whatever and finding out that he knew. Like, I don't get why they answered his call. I thought he was going to trick them and try to be like, I'm selling you this stuff. That's what I thought. I thought because he said, oh, let's give him a cliff and see if they jump off. So I thought he was going to pretend to be like a seller and give them some information. But instead he was just like being like, talking like a Starfleet officer, being like, Starfleet's going to find you. You better give up. Of course, that's not going to work. I thought he had something bigger up his sleeve than that. I'm kind of disappointed. And yeah, I don't know how I feel yet about this, him being related to Maul, but we'll see. We'll see where they take that. But yeah, I like the action sequences in this episode, but it was just slower and it didn't, I don't know, push the narrative before. And here's the thing, it's setting up like a quest, almost like a video game quest type thing where they have to go find the map, so they need the 5 pieces. They're gonna go like, each episode they're probably gonna go find a different piece, and then once they have all 5 pieces, they're gonna have to find the actual thing, and so each episode will be like a quest episode. I'm kind of okay with that format, for me it depends, like how interesting these individual stories are going to be and how much character story they will inflect on these stories. I know some people are just hate that whole format, and I can imagine a lot of people are going to complain about this format and saying it's stupid. A lot of people complained about it in Rise of Skywalker, for example. Anyway, I'm open to it. I'll see where they go with it. I'm not like closed off to this concept of going on quests to find a piece that's going to lead them to another piece that's going to lead them to another piece. It depends on how well they do it. And the fact is that the season's shorter and it only has 10 episodes does make me feel better. But it's interesting that they refilmed the ending to make it a more finale. Because it seems like the Saru thing, like, it's interesting if they were planning on doing that, even if they weren't planning on ending the show, because it seems like a show-ending thing, like, he's going to go off and do his thing. Also, Tilly's back on Discovery. I could have done without that. I didn't mention in the first episode they had the thing with her flirting with that guy. I don't care about that. It's dumb. I really don't like this character. Not the most annoying character, certainly not as annoying as Wesley in TNG, but I just don't care about her at all. And I was like, yay, Tilly's back. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. I'm not going to be like, fuck her, get her off the show or anything like that. It's just like, who cares? I could have done without her. But, we're going to Trill in the next episode. They're setting up, that's where the next puzzle piece is. So, we'll probably get Gray again. And it would be good to see Gray again, because they mentioned Gray in this episode. So, I think they were, like, priming us for Gray to appear in the next episode. So, that's I'm happy about that. That's interesting to see where they take that. And I'm glad that Culber's actually acting like a doctor instead of a fucking counselor. That really annoyed me. Now, he was acting a little bit like a counselor when he went to book and saying, are you okay, and all that, but it wasn't like full on. Like last season, it seemed like he abandoned his doctor job and went to be a counselor instead, which that kind of annoyed me. But anywho, so we'll see where they go from here, but I'm with it so far. I think for this episode, I was under the Twin Moons. I just watched the episode Night Terrors, which I'm about to record my review for. So I keep thinking, one moon, circles, eyes in the dark. Anyway, under the that's what the title reminds me of. But anyway, Under the Twin Moons, my rating for it out of 10 is going to be a 7, I guess. Very good. It's not much worse than the first one, but I do think it's kind of a step down. It moved a bit slowly, but as I said, it had some great character interactions between Saru and Burnham, and I think the action sequences were very good, and it did kind of push the story forward, not really as much as I'd hoped, but interesting episode. So, that is it for my review of the first 2 episodes of Discovery Season 5. I will be back every week to continue to cover Star Trek Discovery Season 5. But in the meantime, you can check out my channel as I continue to go through Season 4 of Star Trek Next Generation. And I do many other videos on many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.